The rain beat hard against the glass that night, the kind of storm that doesn't just shake windows but lives. It was past midnight when Emeka Okafor, a billionaire industrialist and one of Africa's most powerful men, stood barefoot in the kitchen of his Lagos mansion, staring blankly at the sink. Behind him, laughter and jazz floated down the marble hall. From yet another high-profile dinner party, another night of tailored suits, polite lies, and deals sealed with empty smiles. But that night, it wasn't the ministers, the CEOs, or the foreign dignitaries who saw him. It was her, Daisy, the housemaid, who had slipped in quietly to wipe the counters. She carried no status, no designer's perfume, only a rag in her hand and a kind of truth in her eyes that pierced through the weight of his entire empire. For a fleeting moment, everything stopped. The silence between them was louder than the storm outside. He would later say that night didn't change him. It unmasked him. The world gasped when Emeka left his elegant, aristocratic wife, the one who had graced magazine covers and charity galas for years. Boardrooms burst, headlines exploded, family members questioned his sanity. But Emeka Okafor didn't explain. He didn't apologize. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't build on power, wealth, and control. He chose freedom. He chose a daisy. It didn't begin with a scandal, it began with silence. Emeka Okafor had built an empire from the red dust of Enugu to the glass towers of Dubai, shipping oil, tech, real estate. Everything he touched turned to gold. But at home, that gold had long grown cold. His wife, Ifunanya, was a woman bred for the spotlight, beauty queen turned social society icon, always between flights, fundraisers, and fashion weeks. Her days were consumed by images, her nights by her phones. They share a mansion, yes, but not a life. For months, maybe years, Emeka had been invisible in his own home. Why are you always sulking around like one of the staff? She snapped at him. One just because he asked if she had time for dinner. Her voice, sharp and dismissive, cut deeper than she realized, or maybe she did realize and didn't care. She had stopped calling him by pet names long ago. Now it's just Emeka, or worse, nothing at all. Conversations turned into transactions. Touch became rare. Intimacy extinct. But Adaeze noticed. She noticed when he skipped meals and left them untouched on the dining table. She noticed the stiffness in his shoulders after board meetings and the way his eyes lingered on his children with a quiet kind of hunger, a man surrounded by luxury yet starved for affection. It was Adaeze who sang softly to the children when they were sick. Adaeze would pack their school bags, remember their birthdays, their favorite meals. She had no formal education beyond secondary school, but her wisdom ran deeper than most, and more importantly, she cared. She greeted Emeka each morning with a warmth that wasn't forced. She asked him how his day went, not out of obligation but curiosity. She listened, not like a subordinate, but like someone who saw the man, not the myth. One afternoon, he walked into the family lunch and saw his youngest daughter curled up on Adaze's lap, fast asleep. She was human to the child, gentle stroking her hair. It was the kind of peace Ifunanya never had time for. I should be doing that, Emeka whispered, half to himself. Adaeze looked at him, not surprised, not flustered, and said simply, she only wants to be held. Sometimes that's all any of us need. It was in that moment Emeka felt something shifted, not in his heart, but in his bones. Meanwhile, Ifunanya had become cruel in subtle ways. She dismissed staff with insults belittled Adesa for her accent, and made scenes over creased napkins and misplaced car keys. To her, people were either useful or disposable, even Emeka, especially Emeka. You may have billions, she hissed one evening during a fight between closed doors, but without me, you are still some barefoot village boy trying to make calls from a public phone. He didn't argue. He just stood there watching her eyes blaze with a kind of disdain that had become all too familiar. That night he slept in the guest room. It wouldn't be the last time. And outside the chaos of that cold, glittering marriage, Adesa continued to carry the weight of the house like quiet scaffolding, never seen but always holding everything up. He started looking for her more often, noticing the curve of her smile, the way she wiped her hand on her apron before greeting him, even though he never minded, how she looked away when their eyes met, as if she too was afraid of what was becoming obvious. And slowly, dangerously, what began as comfort became connection. What began as gratitude began to feel like something deeper. But neither of them said a word. Not yet. Because they both knew once the first line was crossed, there would be no going back. And the storm was coming. The lines was finally crossed on the quiet Tuesday morning. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even romantic. Not in the traditional sense. He had come home early, exhausted from the heated boardroom standoff in Abuja. The sun was still high, pouring golden light into the living room where Adisa sat on the floor with her son, helping him with homework. She looked up, smiled softly. Welcome, sir. Emeka, he corrected, his voice low. Call me Emeka, please. He hesitated. Her finger tightened slightly around the child's workbook. I can't, she said, not meeting his eyes. But he wasn't looking for permission, he was looking for presence. He sat down on the armchair across from her, loosening his tie. Do you ever think about leaving this job? He asked. Adesa raised her head slowly, her brows knitting together. Why do you ask? He didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he looked at his son, the boy smiling at her, clutching a pencil with confidence, a boy shaped more by a maid than by his own mother. Adesa raised her head slowly, her brows knitting together. Because if you did, Emeka said finally, this house would collapse. She said nothing, just looking at him with eyes that knew too much. That evening, Ifnaya came home late, perfume thick in the air, high heels, clicking with entitlements. She walked past Emeka without a word, dropped her designer bag on the dining table like she was slamming a door, and began complaining about her driver. Can't those people use their heads? She said loudly, pouring herself a glass of wine. They act like they are allergic to excellence. Adisa stood silently in the corner, holding a tray of fresh fruit. She kept her head low, eyes fixed on the floor, but Emeka noticed the way her shoulders tensed. Show some respect, Emeka said sharply. The words hung heavy in the room, heavier than they should have. Ifnaya turned slowly, eye narrowing. To her? She scoffed. You are defending the maid now? What next, Emeka? Going to promote her to the manager of the house? He didn't flinch. No, he said quietly, just reminding you that she has more dignity in her silence than you do in your insults. The silence that followed was a crack of thunder. Ifnaya's eyes widened in disbelief. It was the first time in years he had spoken back, not just passively, but with steel in his voice. She opened her mouth to retaliate, but stopped. Maybe it was the way he looked at her. Not angry, but done. That was the beginning of the end. Weeks passed, conversations between husband and wife became curt, then non-existent. Ifnaya spent more nights in hotel rooms and private jets, while Emeka lingered longer at home in the shadows of his own unhappiness. And always quietly, Adaeze was there. Not praying, not pressing, just present. It was a small thing that brought them closer. She began leaving tea for him on the study table, always hot, always the right amount of honey. He began sitting at the kitchen counter while she cooked, just to hear her hum old songs from her village. They never touched, but the air between them felt electric, heavy with everything unsaid. One night, as the thunderstorms raged outside and lightning lit up the long corridors of the mansion, Emeka found her in the laundry room folding bed sheets. She looked startled at first. Sir? Emeka, he repeated. She lowered her eyes, folding the last sheet with trembling fingers. He stepped closer, and in that quiet room filled with the scent of lavender and rain, he finally said it. I haven't known peace in years, he said. But when I hear your voice, I remember what peace feels like.